Hi, this is Eva for Once Upon a Timeline, and we should now be live. All right, it looks like the streaming is coming good. Give people a chance to come online here. So I have a variety of things I'm going to talk about today. We've got some anatomy material, some more new clouds. Some of these things have been discovered by some of my listeners who are always sharp-eyed, which is nice. Some things on lions. Let's see. Oh, some more weird creatures. So, hey, QPIA's on. First person on. How you doing? Check the quality of the stream here. Oh, it actually says my stream has good quality. That's kind of a miracle. We'll see how long that lasts for. The health is good. That's a new one for me. See how long it lasts for. Shari D, hey, how are you doing? Shari D's on. Rain on the Plains. Did you guys get the like an hour notice before I came on? Because I set it to notify an hour in advance. I'm wondering if it worked. So anyway, we'll give everybody a chance to come on here. Nope, no notice, huh? Yeah. Anyway, I'll be on at the same time, which I guess is now 8 a.m. GMT because of some kind of a daylight savings time at GMT, so it's getting confusing. It's still midnight California time, though. All right, so nobody got the notification. It's supposed to have alerted you guys an hour in advance, but you know what? I really don't know how YouTube works half the time. Yeah, maybe it sends another one out when I go live. Anyways, all right, I'll put this down and get started over here. All right, so basically, I'm just going to go over some of the latest things I've heard this last week. And one of them has been this thing on lions. I've been kind of looking at the lions for the last couple months. And one thing I've noticed was that the male lion, the mane has changed. And I've been kind of watching it over the last couple months as the mane kind of spreads out onto the stomach. And then just yesterday, the Lurking Ghost on Retcon did a post on it. It's always interesting when I'm watching something and then somebody else comes out with the same ME. But I was pretty sure on this one. And I've actually been watching it grow out. But let's see. Now I'm going to just see what people are talking about here. Okay, so nothing going on. So here is one image. You can kind of see it on here. There's a couple things that I've been seeing. Here is a lot of fur and mane fur. I call it mane fur, but it's on the stomach region. And I at first saw it going about halfway back, but it's on a lot of lions, it's all the way back to the back legs now. And another thing I've noticed is that around the head is getting lighter on the males. It used to be that this dark, almost black fur was all the way around all of the mane on a mature male lion, and it was not on the stomach at all. It was just on the scruff part here. But now it seems like the front bit of mane is getting lighter, and then this black part is spreading backwards. The other thing I've noticed just recently is there's some neat little markings on the face now of the male lions that they just look really cool like that. And I remember their face being more like a female before, with just kind of a plain tan look. So there's one image. I get a lot of good stuff from this poster, The Lurking Ghost. That poster really does keep a sharp eye on it. Now you can really see it here. I mean, to me, this just looks ridiculous with it all on the stomach like this. And you will also see that there is a little bit on the elbows now on the male lions. I don't see it on the female lions yet. Let's see. Okay, so actually there's one other thing I wanted to point out about this one. This lion appears to be standing in snow. Now, it could be that, let's see. Okay, it's in the zoo. All right. For a minute there, I was freaking out. But okay, so there's an explanation for that snow. All right. Okay, now here is an old 60s or 70s video. Turn off the sound. Okay, you can see on the, if you look on the elbows, you can see there's fur on the elbows. This is an older video. Now, not all the male lions have the mane fur all the way back on their stomach, but they all appear to have it on the elbows now. And I'm quite sure that no male lions had stomach mane fur before. So, let's see, let's go back. Now, here's an interesting thing that this poster went back, and he actually checked the Wizard of Oz to see what the costume looked like. I know we've all seen a lot of changes in the Wizard of Oz. And this is kind of interesting because he has a little bit of fur on his legs now, this mane fur. So this costume has changed some too. It's weird because the ones on his legs are darker than the rest of it. I'm going to go back and there's a still shot here. See, look, you've got fur here now, and that didn't used to be there. You would think it would be on these front elbows. I'm not sure what they were thinking. I mean, it's not the world-class costume of the universe, but I think they're trying to depict some of that stomach fur sort of here. So there's another change in the Wizard of Oz to go with the gun and the wrench and all the other weird stuff. Rain on the Plains. The lion, that lion is going to be completely covered at some point. Yeah, I don't know where it's going. It would be cool if they got pretty shaggy. They're looking like, they kind of remind me of a fantasy lion now with the face markings. Anyways, yeah, never, that's really where it extended the costume. Yeah, it was never on the legs before. Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely wasn't. Okay, so let's see, we've covered that one, and now I am on. Now, some people have already talked about this some. It's the diaphragm, and somebody pointed this out to me on a private list that I'm on for Mandela's, and also somebody pointed it out on one of my videos that the diaphragm looks different. And the diaphragm is that part, it's the muscle by the lungs that is responsible for, in the old days, it was a muscle that pushed on your lungs and caused your lungs to expand and contract. And it was just a little strip of muscle. But now it's this thing right here, and it's gotten really large. And people were just noticing it in the last week. And then the heart is right in here. And it seems like to me the system has changed some. Not only is the diaphragm a lot larger, but it kind of has a whole different, if you kind of see how it works now, it says during inhalation, the diaphragm contracts and moves in the inferior direction, enlarging the volume of the thoracic cavity and reducing intrathoracic pressure. Now, the way I remember it, the diaphragm was just a muscle that pushed on the lungs and kind of directly pushed them to open and close. But now it just influences the pressure inside the thoracic cavity, and that causes the lungs to expand and contract. So it may be going back a ways, but I don't remember it working like that originally. The diaphragm's movement downward creates a partial vacuum in the thoracic cavity, which forces lungs to expand and fill the void, drawing air in the process. Okay, so this one kind of illustrates it. So they're saying that this diaphragm here is the thoracic diaphragm. And this is what's interesting, because now there used to be it's the diaphragm, but now I've noticed they're starting to call it the thoracic diaphragm. And probably the reason for that is because there's other diaphragms now. There's actually 4 of them, maybe more. It's constantly changing. And one interesting thing that they talked about here was they were saying that if you guys may have noticed, but if you eat a really big meal, now it feels kind of hard to breathe. I mean, you feel like a kind of a pressure on your lungs. Now, way back, I used to have asthma, and the pressure on the lungs, if I eat a lot, reminds me of the feeling of the asthma that I used to have. It's kind of like a hard to get in enough air. I mean, it's not like I'm going to die or anything, but it's somewhat uncomfortable. And they were talking in this little yoga thing that the reason is because you increase the pressure in this abdominal cavity, and that pressure pushes on this upper cavity and kind of makes it, and the lungs are up in here. So it makes it harder to breathe by kind of squashing in the lungs and making it hard for this diaphragm to do its business. So I thought that was real interesting. So now let's talk about the other diaphragms here. All right. Rain on the Plains, 4 diaphragms, good grief. Yeah, there's like more of everything, more art. There's more Mona Lisas, and more the screen paintings, and there's more diaphragms. There's also more amygdalas now. There's 2 amygdalas in the brain. There's like, it's ridiculous. So catch up on anything. Shari D, anybody else feeling exhausted the last 2 days? I've been all right the last few days. I felt terrible over not this last weekend, but the one before, and kind of been up and down, but that's kind of normal for me. I'll just feel really terrible for a couple hours and then I'll be fine. So overall, I feel okay. Let's see. Other people are saying they feel tired. I tend to get it after everybody else a lot of times when I get really tired. Everybody will say they feel terrible, and then 2 days later I'll feel terrible. I did like earlier in the week, I felt kind of, I don't know, overstimulated or something, kind of like crabby. Are there changes to the lower back? Martha Jane asks, are there changes to the lower back? There have been a gajillion changes to the lower back. I haven't noticed anything just recently, but older changes are there. The spikes on the spines are a lot bigger. The lower back vertebrae look a lot bigger. The tailbone looks totally different. I mean, way back, it just was a couple little piddly bones, and now it's this giant, I don't know, it looks like a giant triangular thing. I haven't seen anything just lately. Let's see. Yeah, the tailbone. Yeah, the tailbone now, it kind of curves now. I didn't used to. It used to just be this like vestigial couple little bones. Let me just see here. Wait, wrong mouse. Let's see. Human. See if we see anything in here that's different. Lumbar region. I mean, this region here has definitely changed a lot. It looks like this coccyx area might be kind of differentiating a tad. I really feel like there's constant changes in here, but they're subtle, so you kind of need to have, like, it's hard to, like, lock down on something unless something changes enough that you really notice it. Older people have noticed also that, like, the hip bones are in 2 parts now, and they're just attached here by, I think it's just a little ligament. But yeah, it used to be just a couple little tiny little bones in here. Now we've got all this just giant thing. The other thing is I've noticed that the spine does not have the S shape that it used to have. It used to be a big S curve in it. You can see a little bit of it here. But there used to be a lot more of a hump there, and then it would come around and finish the S. But now you've got this tailbone here that kind of finishes the S. And you needed more S also because the spine used to attach back here in the back of the head, and now it attaches in the middle of the head. Let's see. Claire Hatton, has anyone else had a high-pitched ringing in their ears? I've had a high-pitched ringing in my ears off and on since the 90s. So, yes, I have noticed it, but that's really nothing unusual for me. I can hear it anytime I want to, if I just kind of listen for it. Lately, I've heard it a little more, but, I mean, like I said, that's happened a ton of times. Meeks B. Hey, thanks. Thanks for everybody else's come on. Okay, so anyway, back to where were we? Okay, so we're talking about this 4 diaphragms thing here. All right, so let's get down to it. Okay, so they're saying there's a cranial diaphragm up here, which is kind of weird. I wasn't able to find a lot of this information on any of the mainstream medical websites. I did find some old research that kind of supports this stuff, but I'm wondering if this is kind of new. I mean, you could say that it's a little fringe, but yet I did find research that talks about this. So the cranial diaphragm, it is well documented in osteopathic studies that the central nervous system has a certain rhythmical motion to it. In other words, it has life and actually pulsates as a means to mobilize cerebral spinal fluid. And I have seen some articles just lately where they're saying that although it used to be believed that the spinal fluid would just drain via gravity and then more would be created and it would just kind of flow that way, now they're starting to find evidence that it is pumped somehow and they don't really understand it. But what's interesting is that we're starting to see more and more of that in here. You wouldn't really think of this as like a diaphragm that pumps fluids around the brain, but I guess that would not be a bad thing. So let's see. So then there's the cervical diaphragm. And what's weird is when you hear cervical, you're thinking, that would be around the cervix, but they're saying that the cervical diaphragm is composed of the tongue, the muscles of the hyoid bone, and scalene muscles. I'm not sure what those scalene muscles are, but I assume they're muscles around there. This diaphragm controls the pressures between the cervical spine and the cranium. Now, we've definitely seen a lot of changes around the throat region. I constantly am feeling that my voice is getting lower and lower. I barely recognize it. There's been a lot of changes to the hyoid bone, which used to be hyoid bone for me, and just a lot of changes around there. So it looks like there's going to be some kind of maybe a special region in there that has a diaphragm, I guess. All right. Then there's the thoracic diaphragm that we're used to, the one that runs the lungs. And then they're saying there's a pelvic diaphragm. Found on the pelvic floor, it links the sacrum to the pelvis and essentially a large sheet of specific muscles. This diaphragm controls the pressure between the pelvis and the abdomen. So you can see this sacrum here, that's what the tailbone used to be for us, but now I guess it's just this little bit here. So this is a giant bone here, and it connects to this pelvic floor. So it looks like there's going to be like a whole special pocket here for this that they're working on right now. Shari D. According to my symptoms, something has happened in the last 2 days. It could well be. What I find for myself is that there's just I feel symptoms. I mean, there's very, very rarely a day when I don't feel something that could be a symptom of a shift. And sometimes I feel a lot of like just kind of like a hot flash or heat, but it'll go for like an hour. Sometimes I feel really tired. Sometimes I feel just kind of overstimulated. It just depends. So I really don't. I don't really talk about them unless it's really extreme. So I don't know if I just shift a lot. I mean, I definitely think I shift a lot more than a lot of people. Not many people remember Arctica and kind of my super boring timeline. So it may be that I've just had to shift further, and I don't know. But or maybe I'm just weak to shifts, and other people aren't. But anyway, so I haven't noticed anything super extreme since the weekend before last, and that's when I really noticed it. So I might be that like I said, I sometimes feel it after everybody else, so it might be a few days for me before I'll, hopefully not, but maybe I'll get it then. Let's see. Oops, I think I'm way behind on the chat here. Da-da-da. Rain on the plains. Oh, Rain remembers Arctica. Yay. You know, there's so few people who remember Arctica anymore. When I first shifted, it was like a really popular big deal ME. Tons of people remembered Arctica. And now it's pretty rare. I mean, like Mandela Affected does not remember Arctica last time I talked to him. And he didn't even understand that word. So he definitely comes from a different timeline than me, though. I already knew that. Martha remembers Arctica. Yay. For a while there was almost nobody. Lately there's been a few more people. But I kind of had worried that I was going to like shift away and nobody would ever remember Arctica. So I'm glad that hasn't totally happened. Shari D. These symptoms are not always there and they don't come all together. So when I have them all, it means something happened to me or for me. Yeah, I'm not sure myself. I mean, it does seem like when there's a big shift, I feel extra bad. I wonder if maybe there's a bunch of small adjustments after that. I mean, that's just kind of a wild guess, but that's maybe why it's kind of just on and off rough. Preliminal, yeah, Arctica and Antarctica. That's how it always was. It was Arctica and Antarctica. Those were the pairings. I always know when people came from there because they pair them like that. That's how we always talked about it. And then you'd be like, oh, which one was on the top? You get confused. When you were a kid, anyways. Arctica. Therian remembers Arctica. Yay. Guardian Matrix. I tend to experience a swaying motion similar to walking in a boat. I'm thinking that's when things change for me. I sometimes feel that I can't quite pin it down. I mean, you feel weird and then you notice there were some changes, but I'm not sure exactly when something changes most of the time. One time there was a big change in this weird thing in the house, and then I felt really sick right after that. So I wonder if the symptoms come right after a shift instead of during or before. Because when I saw the item had changed in the house, I felt fine right then. But then later I felt pretty bad. So I don't know. Shari D remembers Arctica. Yeah, it's been a little better lately. It's like some of the other Arctica timeline people have shown up finally. They are super spiny in the center now, Dark Wolf. Check out a picture. There is like a sharp line jutting out across the center now. I don't know if we're talking about the vertebrae. I think I missed the majority. It sounds like you were talking about the vertebrae on that. Could the changes to the spine cause someone who has broken their back to become crippled? You know, it seems like the whole back can change, then damage to the spine could also change and heal. So I'm not sure what's driving. I mean, you'd see your whole back changes. You should, if you had a problem before, it could just heal, one would think. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I mean, I had some nasty damage to my foot, and like 10 years ago, and it healed, and I was fine. And about 8 months ago, I woke up, and my foot was all swollen, and I had that same pain like that last time I had damaged my foot. And it wasn't quite as bad this time, but it's taken another 6 months to reheal. And it was weird because I went to bed and everything was perfectly fine. And I woke up and I have that damn foot problem again. And I'd wondered if I had done something to it during the day. But it has healed again. So I try to have faith in my body to heal. And I think it's a good idea to try to try to have the attitude like you can heal. It won't hurt anything to have a good attitude anyways. But, I can't make promises on anything. We don't know what's going on. Let's see. Dark Wolf's Den. QP, that could be the difference in timelines. Like I am from A and get sick this week. You from B get it next week and so on. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could depend on who's shifting. I mean, I've had it where a whole bunch of things change for me all at once. Flip-flops on some of the spellings and some of the MEs, like some of the popular ones like Fruit Loops. And it just changed for me, but it didn't. Everybody else on Redcon thought it was the same. So it was like I just shifted over here, and everybody else was already here for a while or something. Then every now and then we have other people come in the retcon and they say, oh, everything just shifted, everything flip-flopped for them. But to me, it's been changed, it's the same for months. So that's something that, I mean, it does seem like we kind of shift in batches, or that there's symptoms in batches, but we don't always shift together. So that makes it more complicated, I think. I was asking because I'm concerned about it because I broke my back a few years ago. Yeah, it seems like people, I have not seen any obvious patterns of people having more damage. It seems like the body is able to compensate and adjust from what I can see. I have not heard of anybody suddenly getting worse. I've definitely heard a lot of stories of people suddenly getting a problem they didn't have. But I've heard a whole bunch of other stories of people suddenly getting better from a problem they used to have. So I think that you can't predict at this point. That, I mean, things are definitely switching around, but I mean, it could just as much be that you'll suddenly get better from a problem. We don't know what the parameters are on which way you go, though. Guardian Matrix. I have been trying to talk to people about it, and they did not seem interested. Yeah, if we're talking about the ME, I haven't had any luck. I had one person who seemed to see a bunch of MEs, and she was one of those who just goes, well, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect me, which kind of blew me away. I almost can, it's easier for me to imagine people just assuming it's bad memory than to see it all and say it doesn't matter. I don't understand that one. Yeah, Dark Wolf's Den. I have noticed that for a couple of years now, people seeing the same change at different times. Yeah, like, well, a bunch of us will see the Hillary flip-flop, and then 6 months later, someone will come in and they'll say, oh, that was just a single L on Hillary last week. And the rest of us are like, that flip-flop happened 6 months ago. So it's weird like that. This is one of the pieces of evidence that I can't consolidate, Dark Wolf's Den. Yeah, the shifting at different times. I really don't know. I wonder if maybe we move when we're ready, and maybe we move in batches, but if we're not ready, or maybe I'm coming from a different timeline than others. So maybe a bunch of people from one timeline come in, and then some people from another timeline come in. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if the timelines might be merging, and that's why we see a lot of residual and things like that. Instead of, I mean, I wonder if maybe nobody is really native. And then you've got the added thing that I really wasn't buying it at first, but over time I've really seen a lot of instances where people really do seem to kind of get the download, I call it, when like they'll see an ME and they'll remember it like me. And then when I tell them that that's not current reality, they'll look up and they'll think for a second, and it's like you could almost just see them like getting the download, and then they'll snap back and they'll go, oh yeah, now I remember. And suddenly now they have this clear memory of current reality, and they don't remember the ME way anymore. So it does seem that people get like a download thing. So I sometimes wonder if we all have moved, and maybe some people just get the download more than others, and maybe some people are their timeline was more similar to this one, and so they don't see many MEs. I really can't say I've figured it out yet, but there definitely does seem to be some kind of a ability that some people have to sort of get tuned into the current timeline. I don't think I have that so much, but there have been times when I accepted something that I really shouldn't have. Like the first time I saw the moon out during the day, I really questioned it, but I didn't freak out as much as I would have thought I should have. I accepted it strangely. So there's something weird going on even in my own mind, compared to how one would expect myself to behave when something that freaky happened. I mean, I really should have completely freaked out. You live your whole life not seeing the moon during the day, and then you're like 40 something and you look up there and the moon is out there during the day. That should have had more of a freak out than it did. Let's see. The different timelines could be related to frequencies. I think this has something to do with it and how they change matter, vibrational frequencies. Yeah, what determines what timelines each person goes into? I mean, it might be some kind of your nature. There's something about, some people call that like your frequency. I think that's possible. It kind of sounds right to me. I'm not sure, but Guardian Matrix, maybe you don't experience shift symptoms when people join your reality. Yeah, it could be that if somebody shifts in and it was a drastic shift for them, they're going to feel maybe a lot of shock to the system. But maybe when they come in, they only make a little ripple because we were already here and there are just a few of them coming in. And so maybe we don't feel a lot of it. But then when we make a big shift, then it's more of a shock to our system. I mean, it's just a guess. It kind of fits in with what I've seen so far. I mean, but there's so little data that, I wouldn't want to get too attached to it. But I mean, you can't help but try to figure stuff out even if you don't have data. So I was talking to Guardian Matrix about the human head transplant. I heard that they said that they were capable of doing a head transplant. I have not heard that they've actually performed one yet. If they have, then that would be an ME for me, because I just looked into that not too long ago and they hadn't done it yet. Let's see. Where did I just saw something? Somebody said something about, the download could be them shifting away. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you ask somebody about an ME, would that be enough to cause them to shift? I mean, I instinctively want to say no, but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to discount anything, because sometimes I've discounted things because I didn't like the sound of them, or I didn't, I like to believe things that make me happy, I guess. And then later, when I got used to it, I changed my mind, and I decided maybe that is what's happening. So I don't know. That would be kind of freaky, though. By just asking somebody about an ME, they could shift away. So I don't know. To me, the most likely explanation is they're getting the download, but who knows? Who knows? My dad reacted that way. At first, he said 4 people in the JFK. Then after I showed him the vid was 6, he seemed to switch into 6 timeline. Yeah, I'm not. It seems like some people just really want to conform to what reality says is true. And I see the kind of download phenomena more with people I know are like that. Maybe their memory is just more malleable. They're less stubborn. They're ready to jump on the bandwagon, so it's easier for them. I mean, it's just a theory, but I did kind of notice that for some people, they're more of a follower type, and it just seems like they get the downloads fairly easily. Shari D. First time I saw Cheshire Moon, I almost freaked out. I had seen it a little bit about a year and a half ago, but it wasn't as extreme as it was this last couple months. But I already knew about the ME then, so it didn't freak me out as much, because I'm like, oh, more weird moon stuff. Dang, this thing. I'm in the middle of reading one, and then suddenly the chat jumps. The moon really freaked me out too. Yeah, the first time I saw the moon out in the daytime, and it's interesting, my thought process is, because I just did a double take, and I was like, I never saw the moon out in the day. And then I started thinking, well, if that was really unusual, it should be on the news, and everybody should be freaking out, and everybody's not freaking out, and the gravitational pull of the Earth hasn't apparently changed. And the thing is, I was out hiking, so I had no way of knowing if anybody was freaking out. I mean, for all I know, everybody was freaking out. But it was just weird, because I finally I really only thought about it for like 5 minutes, and then it must be normal then. And then the next few times I saw it, I was kind of freaked out, but I didn't really question it. Sorry, and now we have upside down Cheshire Moon. Yeah, the Cheshire, that it didn't surprise me after I knew of the ME for a while, because there'd already been so many weird moon changes that the Cheshire thing. The penny drops. If I can't be totally real, I just feel like I want to wake up and not see any of it anymore. It's been a rough week. Yeah, I definitely feel that there's times when I don't want to see any MEs. I'm just too overloaded. I just can't. I just feel like I don't want to take in any more data. And that's usually when I'm just psychologically drained. Then when I feel better, I get curious again. Then I'm looking for MEs again. Dark Wolf's Den remembers the moon out in the day since I was a child. Yeah, not for me. That happened, I would say, maybe 5 years ago, approximately. And it was shortly after that I started hearing about the super moons and stuff, which I did not have those originally either. Oops. All right, there we go. And the moon surface in 2016 changed with different arrangement of craters. Yeah, when Mandela Effect did the video, and he did a video on the craters, and he said that this looks like a heart. And then, a couple months later, that crater doesn't even look like a heart anymore. I actually find it hard to memorize all the craters, since watching the moon wasn't really, I mean, I looked at the moon at night, but I didn't spend a lot of time studying the craters and stuff. So I haven't really followed that one as tightly because I try to follow things I already kind of knew well. There's only so much you can stuff into your head. But yeah, I've definitely seen some of the craters change, and I'm sure that, also there's no more man in the moon. Now there's that rabbit in the moon. I talked to some guy who was pointing people the rabbit in the moon. I had nothing to do with it. He just started, oh, you see the rabbit in the moon. So I asked him about the man in the moon. He said he never heard of it. He just dismissed it, man in the moon. So that was kind of a trip for me because when I was growing up, it was always the man in the moon. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine someone never heard of the man in the moon. And this was kind of an older guy, too. So, I mean, either he got the download or he's not from my timeline because he should have known. Let's see. Yeah, the moons are crazy. So many supermoons that were never a thing, while so many things like that which never were. Yeah, and they're calling, now we got all these colored moons. Only like now the moon turns red a lot. I'm thinking that these colored moons, right now they just name the moon a color and it's not really that color. But I'm sure I'm not the first person to guess that eventually it'll be more colors than just the red. I mean, Guardian Matrix. Bye-bye, Guardian Matrix. Good night. All right. Later. Dang, the chat keeps jumping. I wish there was a way to make that stop. I saw it once during the day when I was a small child, and our teacher said how rare it was, but now it happens all the time. That's interesting, Martha. That must be a different timeline. In my old timeline, they would say that eclipses only happened at the poles. You could not get a full eclipse in the middle of the, like near the equator. So that's definitely changed for me. I haven't heard many people mention that one. So I used to be bummed out because I'm like, oh, I can't see an eclipse unless I travel up to like Arctica, but Arctica's gone now. So, I mean, up to the poles and, down to the poles. The penny drops. The only reason I'm here so early is because I really need the meds. First time I've actually probably needed the stream. I'm sorry to hear that, Penny. I know there's definitely times when it's just too much, and I think it's times when I'm already upset and it just sometimes I just feel like I can't take any more change, but then later I'll feel better. But it goes in cycles, so just remember you're gonna feel better later. You just gotta, sometimes you just gotta wait it out, kind of batten down the hatches. Once upon, that makes sense. They conform to whatever reality says. Preliminal said that. Yeah, I think we're talking about the downloads there. It could be. The thing weird about the downloads is sometimes it's like I said the reality and they just conform to it. But sometimes they come up with a bunch of details that I didn't even say, and then suddenly they know. So it's like they're somehow tapping into the current reality, or trying to make it up, or trying to force it to fit. So, I mean, there's definitely been times when I asked one little question and then suddenly they knew everything about the current reality, like a freaking wiki article. I hear a wiki article, like, just, it kind of freaks me out sometimes. It's like, how do you know all this stuff? Cedar James, that's why I think there's only one timeline that is being altered. Everyone sees it initially. I sometimes wonder about that, Cedar, but the one thing that I don't understand is if there's only one timeline being altered, then I think we should only have two memory options, either our original timeline or the current one. But like a lot of people don't remember Arctica, and I do. So either they're either they're getting like a partial download where the concept of Arctica is being somewhat erased, or they just come from a different timeline. And I'm not really sure how to separate those two, but there's a lot of versions of some of the MEs. Like earlier, someone remembered seeing the moon and being told it was rare to see it during the day. Well, in my timeline, you never saw it during the day, and then suddenly I started seeing it during the day around sunset, like a little bit before, like an hour before sunset or something. And when I first was seeing it during the day, that's how it was. And I don't know if it happened in the morning because I'm not a morning person, but you wouldn't see it like at noon when I first saw that shift. So it's kind of been gradual. And then by the time it started showing itself in the middle of the day, I already knew of the ME. So my thought processes were really different at that point. But what I don't get is if it's originally only one timeline, why we all have different memories of that one old timeline. So that's the one thing that keeps me from really jumping on the bandwagon of it being one timeline. Cedar James, the CDC has a mock zombie apocalypse preparedness kit plan on their site. Yeah, I heard about that about maybe 6 months ago. It's weird. The whole zombie trend is something that kind of been fascinating me for years. Even before I knew the ME, I had started to really wonder about what causes trends. Why do people suddenly all into the zombie thing? Because 10 years ago, you didn't hear anything about zombie apocalypses. It just wasn't a thing. And now everything is zombie. So what causes that people to latch on? It's like some kind of a weird group phenomena. Preliminal. A mind control feed might be blocking the majority for a spirit purpose. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't understand. I mean, if you think about it, all of what's going on in the way the ME, all the excuses and all the rationalizations, I mean, the pure level of processing power to keep track of all that is just ridiculous. It's beyond imagining the amount of mind power or processing power or something power that has to go into this to keep it cohesive. I mean, it just boggles my mind. Cupia remembers Arctica. Yeah, it seemed like for a while I was just in timelines where almost nobody remembered Arctica. I really did think that I would end up being the only one who remembered it, maybe. I mean, I was posting on it for a while and like nobody would come in and say they remembered it. And that actually kind of really scared me because I just got scared that nobody would remember my old timeline. And that I would just be like some total weirdo even amongst the ME community. Martha Jane, I suspect there are many layers to this one reality and each person notices changes at their own pace, although there are groups that are clustered together. Yeah, it might be something like that. Some kind of quantum thing where you're maybe just one slightly different version over or something. It's just so hard to kind of really conceive of it, but it's so hilarious when someone is ME affected and doesn't know. Yeah, there was somebody on one of my YouTube videos recently that was she was talking about, she said, "Judge not lest ye be judged." And she was trying to naysay one of my videos. And then she quoted that out of the Bible. And then, of course, she did not realize that she was quoting something that doesn't exist anymore. And so the ME affected on my channel were like, well, where does that come from? And she's like, well, the Bible, of course. And then they informed her that that's not in the Bible. And then we didn't hear much from her after that. But it's just funny because she just so self-righteously claimed it was in the Bible. And then, of course, she's going to backtrack and say, oh, well, it's said differently sometimes or something. But yeah, I remember judge not lest ye be judged was in the Bible. And it was one of my favorite sayings from the Bible. And I specifically looked it up to make sure it was in there, so I knew what I was talking about when I would self-righteously quote that to everybody. So I know it was in there before. I'm not a Bible expert, but I know that one was in there because I specifically checked for that one. More like they are actors and I'm Truman. Yeah. I'm really starting to see more about what Mandela Effect was talking about. People in this timeline like the drama. They just kind of like to be kind of all excited about little things and, oh my God, I didn't get this just right. And they're just kind of like, it's kind of like corny actors almost through life. Their little life things make this. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but I'm starting to feel like when I meet those people, they're from a timeline more similar to this one. I mean, they're nice people. It's just that it's kind of tiring for me that they're just sort of, it's so corny, It's just, I don't know. I guess it's just not my style. My brother is ME affected and doesn't believe in it. I did the ME quiz with him and it was 100%. He was so shocked that he didn't talk to me for like 2 weeks. Yeah, you prove them wrong, and yeah, a lot of them just run. They don't want to deal with it. Found a guy named Dale Dufay Tetras of the Milky Way, and he got some good theory about our shifts. Yeah, I don't know that guy. Maybe you can kind of give us the short version. I'm 53 and never heard of the rabbit in the moon, always the man in the moon. Noticed my voice changing last Friday. Paul, is it getting deeper? Because mine has gotten a lot deeper. And it actually sounds, when I listen to my recorded voice, it used to sound so different than what it sounded like in my ears. And now my recorded voice actually sounds fairly similar to what I hear in my ears. And what I hear in my ears sounds really deep. And it has better vibration. And my singing voice has improved quite a bit at the lower registers too. I used to be able to sing high pretty good, but I now can sing the more songs, ones that I couldn't do before. The Chinese is where the rabbit in the moon came from. Well, it wasn't in my old timeline because you couldn't see a rabbit in the craters before. That was the thing. Cedar James, yeah, they say there's a rabbit in the moon now. There, another verse missing. Beware of those who are quick to the tongue. I can't find it now. It could well be. I just, I wasn't a Bible expert, so that one would be one for Kat from the EYA channel. Yeah, she would know those, and she would be the one to go to about that one if something's missing. Yeah, rain on the plains. I don't think I've seen anybody mention that change, but it used to be that they'd say, oh, when you hear yourself, you won't even recognize yourself. And it was true. But now I sound a lot like what I hear in my head now. Our head's a whole different shape. The whole throat region's changing. Probably the vibrations through the skull have changed. So there's so many variables there. Preliminary, yeah, ask Kat. She would be a good one to know. I mean, there's no guarantee that we're all from the same timelines, but she's pretty sharp. If anybody would know, it's probably going to be her. Do you think our voice is improving I hope so. I can't sing even if my life depended on it. I think that the voices are getting nicer sounding. They sound like with more vibration, more kind of a. It's they sound better to me. I think the voices are improving. I haven't heard anybody that sounds worse, and some people do sound nicer. And I've definitely noticed it in some people around me. It's not just myself that their voice just sounds nicer. Probably a change in voice due to all the pressure-controlled diaphragms. That's Dark Wolf's Den. There's been a lot of change in the hyoid bone. Originally, there was no hyoid bone for me way back. Maybe about 6 years ago, they started talking about the hyoid bone only in humans. And it was a lot smaller then. This is my timeline anyway. And now it's the hyoid bone, and the shape is a lot different. It's a lot more sophisticated. And if you look, this whole structure in here is changed drastically. And a lot of these parts are starting to connect up. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's so many factors, but I tend to think that is the main factor. I also suspect that that's why you don't see the Adam's apple in Scooby-Doo anymore. That's a popular ME that a lot of people remember Scooby-Doo having a giant... or not Scooby, it was Shaggy having a giant, creepy Adam's apple that would move around as he talked. And when he was scared, you would see it going. And I suspect it might have gone away because it doesn't conform with the current shape of where we're heading with the throat region. I've definitely noticed that even the shape of the Adam's apple, it's just different now. It used to be kind of a circle thing, but now there's all this stuff going over here on the throat that it just looks different to me. Yeah, Shaggy's Adam's apple. It's and it used to have somebody. I didn't quite remember this, but somebody mentioned there was like 2 or 3 little hairs that would stick off it too. And when they mentioned that, I do remember those hairs. Speaking of Scooby, Australia looks like Scooby-Doo now. I don't know. I don't know about that one. Yeah, with the hairs. I can't take credit for remembering the hairs, but somebody said it on one of the lists, and I'm like, yeah, that's right. There was like 3 hairs, 2 to 3 hairs that would stick off. And this is like the early, like the 70s Scooby-Doos. It's not these later Scoobies, because that was when I was a kid. The recent Scooby-Doos, I've never watched those because I was older. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to where was I on this? Okay, so that's covering those 4 diaphragms, and it looks like we're going to have this 4 sections. It looks like this brain thing is gearing up to have interesting flow through the brain cavities with the cerebral spinal fluid. Thoracic cavity, definitely more sophisticated. I don't remember these cavities being so well defined, and now we've got these diaphragms between them. So I think that's something that's developing. This is another thing that's interesting. I used to really wonder about hiccups, and they used to say they didn't know how they occurred or why, but it seems like they've made some progress on that. And they said hiccups are a diaphragm spasm. And the diaphragm spasm, which I haven't really heard of a problem called diaphragm spasm, but in this timeline, if you have irritation of the nerves causes spasm problems in the diaphragm, you can get hiccups, hiatal hernia, temporary paralysis, pain in the middle of abdomen. And here's kind of a picture of our current thoracic diaphragm. And look they got these weird little tips on it and stuff. I mean, that used to just be a flat muscle before. So, I don't know, pretty interesting. Hiccups is a symptom of diaphragm spasm. So that's just like a mild symptom, and it usually passes. But then you could get these hiatal hernias and stuff. Spasm leading to temporary paralysis. This is a condition in which a temporary paralysis of the diaphragm occurs as a result of sudden force applied to the abdomen. This makes it difficult to breathe and may also cause hiccups. That's all new to me. And then they're talking about how it might be related to acid reflux, diaphragm spasm caused due to irritation of nerves. Anyway, kind of weird. Okay, here's another weird one. I brought this one up a while back, and nobody really knew what I was talking about. But this is on the paws of my dog. So you can see this is a dog's paw. About 5 years ago, I was looking at my dog's paw, and I've had dogs for years. I mean, it's not my first dog. And I just saw that her paw pads, her little jellies, did not look like I remembered. I remember them just being like a smooth, hard skin. And I saw on the edges that there was like hairs, but they weren't hairs. They were kind of hairs. And I just thought it was the weirdest thing at the time. You just barely see them on the edges. And I know people are going to say, oh, well, it was just because your dog was getting older. But I've had, a number of dogs through my life, and none of them ever had that. And then 5 years ago, suddenly she had that. And all dogs have them. And apparently the way these paw pads grow now, it used to be just skin, but now paw pads are like a compact blob of keratinaceous hairs that all pack together. And if they get too long, your dog's paws get hairy. And so that's you call it hyperkeratosis, where there's too much keratin growth on the paw pads. That used to just be skin on my dog's paws, but now it's a packed together bunch of keratinous hairs is what your dog's paw is made of. So it's a trip. And I looked into this about 5 months ago because I thought about it. I'm like, maybe that's an ME. And this whole storyline has changed since 5 months, because now hyperkeratosis can also happen on the nose. And when I first read about it, there was nothing about nasal hyperkeratosis. So they're basically saying if your dog grows too much keratin, he could get this. And when I first looked into it 5 months ago, they were saying it had to do with when your dog gets older and doesn't get enough exercise, and then it's kind of like overgrows, and you would just get like a scissors and trim them, and that would fix it. But now there's a bunch of stuff on it being on the nose. Is that a person with it? Okay, well, I'm not going to go there, but here's a close-up of the little hairs on the bottom of the foot. And now they have these dog noses that get it, and then they're say just put moisturizer on there and that'll fix it. I just don't get how, if your dog's nose is overgrown with keratinous hairs, how moisturizer is going to fix it. But that is what the current timeline is saying, that it can be fixed with moisturizer. Here's another dog with a keratinous noses. I mean, I've definitely heard of dogs having autoimmune skin problems, but now they're saying it's hyperkeratosis, and that's what's different. And they're looking like hairs. It used to just look like scabs, but now they're actually like hairs growing on the dog's snout. I mean, look at this one. So, I don't know. That's just an ME for me. Let's see. See what you guys are up to here. Shaggy doesn't have the Adam's apple. Yeah, that I can't take credit for that ME. Somebody mentioned it on Retcon, but it's definitely an ME for me. They used to just, Shaggy's Adam's apple, it used to gross me out when I watched it as a kid. I'm like, I hated those scenes. I'm like, ew, that looks all creepy. So it's funny, well, I don't miss it, but except for that was my old timeline, but it's kind of a trip that it's gone. I have a breathing technique against hiccups. Dark Wolf Stand. Yeah, I had developed something a number of years ago where I kind of, when a hiccup is oncoming, I kind of push with my abdomen, and I kind of I try to help the hiccup go harder. And that will often, I can get rid of my hiccups that way. There's a couple other things that people have shown me, and one that has always worked is if you plug your ears and you plug your nose and then you drink water. But you need somebody to help you because you can't do all of those at once. But the few times that I tried that actually was foolproof. But that was years ago, so I don't know on the current timeline with the current body system if that still works. I have acid reflux. It isn't as bad this year since I've lost weight. Preliminal, one thing I've noticed when I get that, and you might want to try it, because my old body just had the ribs across the front like fingers and didn't have this breastbone across here. But if I push down, I get like my favorite thing to use is an old used up aerosol bottle or something, and then I put a towel on it, and then I kind of lay on it so it pushes in that bone that runs across the front. Just gently. You don't want to hurt yourself or bruise yourself, but just kind of gently palpitate. That really seems to fix a lot of any acid reflux I might get. And I haven't really heard of anybody saying that, but it's like stuff gets stuck along there, and by doing that, it kind of releases it, and then I'll get up and I'll burp, and then I'll feel way better. I don't get a lot of it now, but I figured that method out. I'm curious if it worked for anybody else. Maybe, I mean, when you have acid reflux, I mean, you'll probably try anything, and that one is, don't push too hard. You don't want it to be uncomfortable, but it actually feels kind of good to me to do it too. I've always had dogs, and they've always had flat, sort of squishy pads. Yeah, the pads used to be just skin, but now they're like this keratin stuff. It's a subtle change, but I noticed it on my dog when that shift happened. Right, it was super callous skin before. Yeah, now it's these packed in. Look, if you have dogs, if you have a dog, look on the jellies, on the side of the jellies, and see if you can see those little hairs now. Does this happen to cat paws? That's a good question. I do not have a putty right now. Let's see if there's hyperkeratosis in cats. Keratosis, cat. Oops, hyperkeratosis in dogs and cats. I wouldn't be surprised if their little paws are also like that. Occurs when the skin on your pet's nose or paws thickens, becomes excessive, and hardens. Yeah, well, that's the old storyline, but this is also some of the new storyline. Is they're saying that hyperkeratosis, what is that junk? They're saying that get rid of that. They're saying that hyperkeratosis can be caused by all these diseases: leishmaniasis, canine distemper, zinc responsive dermatosis. I have not. That's a new one. That's a new one for me. It wasn't like that 6 months ago. All right. So it says hyperkeratosis in dogs and cats there, but it doesn't have anything on cats. Let me just look at the images. All right. It looks like it's all nasal. Local vet suggested a cream which includes zinc oxide. I'm not, these are nasty looking things. I'm not seeing the same kind on the cats right now as I'm seeing it on the dogs. Hyperkeratosis can just be a word for like skin thickening too, so it's kind of confusing. Yeah, look, even though I typed in cats, I'm pretty much just seeing dogs at this point. So, some unsavory looking images too. Let's see. Well, anyway, so check your dog's little paw pads. If the furs, if these little hairs get too long, supposedly it can be painful for the dog. So you can take a scissors and trim them, or take them to the vet. So here's somebody just trimming theirs down. These weird skin things, they're dead. They're already they're dead skin, so you can trim them down. And if they get too long though, they poke in to the inside of the pad. So it's a new thing that we kind of have to watch out for with our dogs. It doesn't look like they're on the cats so much yet though. Shari D. Preliminal, I don't know about that, but allergies are not very easy to get rid of. Shari D, you might want to try an elimination diet. I got rid of almost all of my allergies by cutting out most of the wheat. And that was about 5-6 years ago. So I don't know if I still need to cut out wheat. I've definitely slacked on it and I haven't got my allergies back. But basically, I was not allergic to wheat per se. Like, it didn't make me sneeze or anything. But when I cut out wheat, then all my other allergies went away. No more spring sniffles, no more clogged nose, no more sinus infections, and no more asthma, which is a huge one. So I definitely suggest trying an elimination diet. It's cheap, it's easy, it's free, basically, other than cost of food. And then you basically eliminate a lot of likely candidates, and then you see how you feel. If you feel better, then you add foods back in one at a time, and then you see if any specific one triggers the problem. And if your allergies are bad, it's definitely worth trying. And so the worst that can happen is it doesn't work, but it's worth it because you've got your whole life in front of you. All right, so Dark Wolf's Den's treatment for hiccups. I breathe in through my mouth or nose as slow as I can possibly stand, then back out the same way, and the hiccups are completely gone after that. Huh. As slow as possible. That's interesting. Huh. I could try it. Penny Drops. Have to go, peeps. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for coming. I hope I was able to help like a tiny bit and feel better. You're not alone. Believe me, you're not alone. There's a lot of people freaking out over the ME. Why do you think it's not major news and celebrities do not talk about ME? I think a few of them have mentioned it, but then like one of the singers had said something about how that's Berenstein kind of stuff when one of his lyrics changed. But they get so much ridicule. You've seen the trolls go after us. That might be why. If a few of them have tested the waters, and they got a lot of crap, and a lot of them still make their money being public figures, and they don't want a reputation of being the crazy one. So that might convince them to back off. Another one that I remember, what's his name? The guy who played Sulu on Star Trek. I have heard that he sometimes posts stuff about the ME on his blog. I have not caught in any of them. I don't really watch his blog often, but he's an interesting one because in my timeline he died. And in this timeline, he's still alive and posting apparently on the ME. So that's interesting. So I guess he just posts stuff like, isn't this interesting? He doesn't say like, oh, I see a bunch of MEs. But he does kind of put it out there. So that's interesting. Dark Wolf's Den. I think most of them won't talk about it for sounding crazy. Yeah. I think that's probably a lot of it. Wish the ME would give me a fatter bank account. Yeah, well, that's one thing interesting, though. None of us come into a shift with, like, more or less money. So somehow the ME has managed to keep certain things stable across timelines or whatever's going off. So it's interesting that way. Shari D. I actually hate tomatoes and don't eat it. Same thing with potato. Some of the foods that are commonly associated with problems are wheat. For me, it was just wheat. Other glutens were fine. Dairy is a huge other one. And tomatoes and potatoes from the nightshade family are definitely on there. You have to check the rest of them. I kind of remember the ones that affect me more, so I don't have the whole list. And who knows, it might change with the shift too. And we do have a movie coming out this year. That's right, the Mandela Effect movie's coming out. Although I'm not sure how much of an impact it will have, because the X-Files one did not have much of a impact, and that's a pretty popular show. And on Retconned, I was watching the visits to our sub, and they about doubled for like a day or two, but they have more than doubled on other days for no apparent reason. So I would not say that we got much of a push out of the X-Files episode. Okay, so anyway, that was the dog paws one. Okay, this one's interesting. This one is these, what do they call it? Ship tracks. Okay, this one came from a message, a comment left on one of my videos. Lions are from India. Okay, where was it all? One of the things they say causes these clouds is from ships at sea. So they never existed before, even though shipping has been going on for 100 years, and now they're the cause. So what he's talking about is these ship tracks. And here's some images of them from Google, seen from space. Look at all these trails. Those are pretty trippy. And apparently, this is a very good find. And apparently, these things are caused by ships. Ships make their own clouds, and the clouds make these streaks. Ship tracks are clouds that form around the exhaust released by ships into the still ocean air. Water molecules collect around the tiny particles from exhaust to form a cloud seed. More and more water accumulates on the seed until a viable cloud is formed. In the case of ship tracks, the cloud seed are stretched over a long, narrow path where the wind has blown the ship's exhaust. So the resulting clouds resemble long strings over the ocean. Ship tracks are a type of homogeneous cloud. And if you click on homogeneous, a homogeneous cloud is like a man-made or artificial cloud. So like if there's a clouds over a factory coming out of the factory exhaust, that would be a homogeneous cloud also. So I had never heard of these ship tracks. I recently did a thing on weird clouds, and I had not caught these ship tracks. But it's a trip. Look at these things. I guess all the ships are heading the same way sometimes, and sometimes they're not. I mean, look at those. I mean, these got to be really long, because look at the curvature of the Earth, or so-called curvature of the Earth there. I mean, it's hard to believe they would even stay cohesive. Now, they're saying the wind blows them. So, I don't know. It's just a whole nother weird cloud thing to squeeze in there. All right, so let's see where we are here. The X-Files just made fun of the ME, Martha Jayne. I think they did, but I actually didn't think it was that bad. They included some actual MEs. They talked about it. I kind of related in the beginning when Mulder kept saying it's a Mandela effect, because I kind of feel like I'm saying that to myself all the time. At the end, they made a question because that guy got hauled off, but then somebody came out of the building and is like, why are they hauling off one of our people? So they left it all open in the air. And yes, they did make it like a comedy, and I know people hate to see something that we take really seriously be a comedy, but on the flip side, I think it could have been far, far worse. They left the outcome open-ended. There was a lot of things that couldn't be explained by just that guy being crazy. Gorangao Queenie. I always remember as the Arctic and the Antarctic. Yeah, you're not from my timeline. In my timeline, it was Arctica and Antarctica. Here it's just the Arctica and Antarctica. Yeah. I've seen a couple people say they remember Arctic instead of Arctic, missing the C. And so you're not the only one. But yeah, it wasn't my timeline that missed the C like that. I had the A. And it was my Arctica was a continent, one of the 7 continents. And we still had 7 continents, but in my timeline, Europe and Asia was one whole continent. And continents were large blobs of land. They weren't political. And since Europe and Asia was one large blob of land, and still is, they were one continent. So that's why we still had 7. In this timeline, Arctica's gone, but they split Europe and Asia into 2 continents, which makes no sense to me at all. But that's how it was for me. When I try to talk to my wife about Emmy, she gets a little aggressive and refuses to discuss it. Makes me wonder if I'm going crazy, but I know what I know. Yeah, I think people are scared, and when they're scared, a lot of people get angry. They don't want to be scared. You're basically trying to force information on her and ideas on her that she's scared of and she doesn't want to think about. And so that response is fairly common, unfortunately. My advice would be to just not push, because the more you push, the more obstacles she's going to put up if you're going too fast for her. Try to just give her a chance to think about things. And, she has to go at her own pace. She can't go any faster than she's capable. So if you push, she's just going to dig her heels in harder. So I know it's hard because you probably really want to talk about it. We all do. But she's not able to go that fast right now. And, maybe in the future she'll make a little progress on it. But you got to let them go at their pace. That's our only choice, sadly. Yeah. My sister got aggressive too, won't talk to me now. We understand. Yeah, I mean, this is a really common problem. It's definitely a really common problem. I tried to tell the woman who was my hairstylist, and she was one of the. It doesn't. She was the one that saw a lot of MEs, but she just felt like it didn't. It didn't. She didn't want to. It wasn't important. She thought. I'll tell you, she gave me a really crappy haircut. I think she was stressed out and nervous, and she just couldn't concentrate on the hair. So. Tell your stylist about the ME at your own risk, because your hair may not come out as good as normal. And to be fair, I don't think she was giving me a crappy haircut on purpose. She's a nice lady. I think she was just so frazzled. There's a good chance you don't hear from people again after telling them the ME. Yes, Cedar James, I agree with you. Some people will just avoid you after that. I try to make it like, hey, there's this weird internet trend, and I try to keep it really lighthearted, and that does help. But even so, there'll be some people who are disturbed and do not want to hear any more disturbing material, and the way they solve that is to not talk to you anymore. I got lucky and got an ME partner, and most people around me that I talk to are affected. Dark Wolf's Den, I'm like so jealous. I am so jealous of you. In my timeline, Europe and Asia were separate continents. The tectonic plate was called Eurasian plate, but the continents were not called that. So were they like actually divided with like water between them? Is that what you're saying? That would be a trip. I'm so is Are they just saying it was separate tectonic plates, so they're calling it a different continent because it was a separate tectonic plate? That would be a kind of a smooth way to spin it by saying that the continents had to do with tectonic plates. That would make sense. I mean, it would make more sense than what we have now. So I don't really see how they determine the continents right now. There's no real logic behind it. I remember them always being together because I thought it odd they were called one landmass and two continents. Yeah, Dark Wolf's Den, that's the current timeline. It doesn't make sense to me why it's two continents. But I guess maybe your timeline was more like this one. I mean, they would often call it, that continent was Eurasia. That's what they would call it. Like, I would write Europe because I would forget about Russia, and then my teacher would correct me that she would accept Europe, but Eurasia was the right answer, and I should start writing Eurasia. But, back then, Europe was huge. Russia was a lot smaller. Kazakhstan, I don't think it even existed back then. Europe is so tiny now. Europe has shrank. It's kind of creepy how tiny Europe is now, at least compared to all the other continents. I mean, Europe used to be like the size of Russia. They were kind of even, and now Russia's huge, and that whole eastern side of the whole Eastern Europe is just huge now. A friend I've known since the 80s hasn't talked to me since I showed them the changes I'm seeing. You might want to just try talking to them again, and you stepping forward, and then just don't talk about the ME anymore. If they feel like you're not going to scare them with the ME anymore, then they can sometimes get over it. They might be just, there's like kind of a negative connotation because the last time you talked about the ME. If you can smooth that over and talk about fun stuff, they might get past it. All right, somebody needs to be deleted. Let's see if I can get this to work. Doinks. Hide user on this channel. I believe that is the proper way to get rid of somebody. All right. That was my first moderation activity, and it seems like that button was really sticky. All right. What I really need to do is I need to set some moderators here so you guys can kind of keep an eye on it. So QP, I'm going to add you since I saw you a bunch of times. I'm going to throw you a spanner. People who are here a lot. And you're always first, so you get the first one. Hopefully it's not too much of a challenge. I don't know the logic behind it. I just know we had 5 continents: Africa, America, Europe, Australia, Antarctica. Africa, America, Europe, Australia, Antarctica. Huh. You're the first one I've heard that didn't have 7 continents. It seems like everybody had 7 continents, but the 7 they had were all different. Yeah, I'm in Germany, and it's so much smaller. Cedar James, it's interesting. You see your own change. That was one thing I wanted to kind of go over a little bit. I'm going to jump ahead. Oh, wait, USA. I just want to talk about USA. All right, originally what I remember is the USA map looking kind of like this one. It was straight across. We did not have this island and this water coming down from Canada over here. It was straight across. But then it was kind of close to straight across here as well. And so we've really, and I've watched this change over the last year and a half where this, the lakes here have sunk down quite a bit. And lately, a big chunk of the southeast quadrant of the United States is, it's like the whole state is kind of slurped in on the bottom there, so it looks like it should be down straighter. This is the closest map I can find that looks kind of like what I used to see all the time, and all the maps were always straight across up here. But now the majority of the maps, and if you go on Google Earth, it looks like that. They show the kind of bowed in the center here and kind of tipped to the side a bit. And this tip thing is something that I've just been seeing in the last few months. And this area here in Maine, it looks like there's a big dog leg sticking out, and we just didn't have that before. Florida's a lot smaller. That's a kind of an older ME. California, this is an older ME, but California used to be big. We used to cover almost the entire western side and most of the coast, and California's gotten tiny. There's a little chunk missing out of, like, chew bites lately have shown up right here under California on the the lower eastern side. There's been, before that, there was some chomps taken out right here. We've also got these funky islands now that have just been kind of spawning, and they're called the Channel Islands. And that is something we've just been hearing about the last 6 months. So it looks like California's getting a pile of islands out there. And they're saying, oh, well, you didn't know about them because the military bases are on them. But no. I remember maybe 15 years ago, I first heard about Catalina Island, and I hadn't heard of that one. But then that was it. There weren't a big pile of friggin' islands. So, I mean, other people have covered that. I know Life Matrix covered the islands. So, a lot of things changing here. But just lately, this chunk missing out of here, where everything is slurped in, we're missing some land over here, definitely. So, another thing I want to cover, other people have kind of covered this, but the time zones for the United States are weird looking. Way back, I had looked into the time zones, and the time zones used to follow the edges of the states. And there's no reason. This is the current map, and look at it, it's ridiculous. There are, why would the time zone come down here, then jog way over here? And, you know, it would be straight if it would be more straight if it just followed the edges of these states. And that's how they used to be. There was just like one state somewhere where it cut across, but because the state was long and skinny, and so they would just chop that state. But see right here, why would this jog over here? Here, look, what is this? Why would you suddenly have a big chunk of the mountain time zone into Oregon? There's no reason for that. That's just ridiculous. I mean, how did this even come to pass like that? So I maybe eventually when these things all get done shuffling, the time zones will make sense again. I don't know, but the time zones are messed up. Well, I just wanted to add that in real quick since we're talking about geography changes here on the chat part. Pangea, it's where it's heading. Yeah, Pangea. When I took school, there was no such thing as Pangea. I've heard about that about 10 years ago. They said it was a theory that maybe originally that maybe there was once a supercontinent called Pangea. Now it's quite accepted. I think that's probably an ME, but you can't really prove it because the current timeline, Pangea, goes way back, and in my timeline, I never heard of it. So, I mean, it has gotten more accepted, but Torrid. Yeah, Torrid. I had never heard of that story until after I learned of the ME, the story of the guy from Torrid. It wasn't in, but I'm curious if it was in anyone's. Dark Wolf's Den. The story from the man from Torrid. Yeah, I heard of the man from Torrid about 2 years ago. After I knew of the ME, I had not heard of the man from Torrid before that. I think it's interesting There was also a creepypasta story that I did hear about before I learned of the ME, maybe around 2014. And it basically was a story about how, and creepypasta is just like creepy stories. They're not meant to be real. But it was a story about how all these people got together and realized they remembered this same strange movie. And they all had the same recollection of what was in the movie, but the movie never existed. And, looking back on that, that was probably the first thing I read that really reminded me of the ME, and I thought of it later when I learned of the ME. So one thing we noticed a lot of MEs is they come in these clickbaity articles, and they come in media as just ideas, like they're just floating the idea. So I have to wonder if it was kind of like paving the way for us kind of implanting the idea of the ME. I mean, that's just a theory, and it's kind of out there, but it just seems like maybe. Lone Eagle is talking about geography, and he's doing a good job. Also, Noble Nisty. Yes, they do cover it a lot. I just can't keep up with everybody's. But yeah, they do a good job. There's certain people who are extra good at certain areas, and Lone Eagle and Nobleness D are very good at the geography MEs, definitely. And it's fun for me to go and see them talk about stuff that I noticed, but they know more stuff than I do. I mean, I see some of the obvious ones, and there's certain things that I studied that they may not have, so there's a lot of overlap, though, definitely. Yeah, the geography ones are like the body changes. How do people live in one spot and then the area total changes and have memories to go with it? Yeah, I don't know. I'll tell you, Cedar James, one thing I noticed for years, and I didn't know about the ME then, but I noticed that there's a lot of hills in my region. It's little hills, and the houses are kind of nestled on these little hills. And there's a number of things I noticed that there had been some new lights that would show. You kind of know what lights come on at night on the hills around you, and the lights correspond to a house. And I had noticed some new lights coming on, and then during the daytime, I realized that it was a house. And I was confused because I didn't remember any lights or houses being there. And I was like, well, could they have been a house there all that time and then not have the lights on at night? And somehow that made sense to me at the time, but now it sounds ridiculous. I wonder if those are just, new houses. I mean, I've talked about that house on a hill, the incredible morphing house on a hill, and I've been watching that one come in. So people are showing up in here, in this region, new houses. So it's like we're getting kind of put together or something. I mean, I wonder if from their perspective I'm showing up slowly, and from my perspective they're showing up slowly. I don't know, but it's so sneaky the way it goes that I could totally see people not noticing and writing it off to bad memory, because most of the people I know just don't pay attention to details. They just don't notice those things. When the sky changed, I mean, almost nobody really noticed it. They just, you think that people would notice, but they just don't. They don't see those little details. Preliminal Cedar, when did you first notice the change of Germany? Was it sudden or gradual? Well, I can't answer for him, but I'm gonna bet right now it was gradual, because all the changes that I've seen have been gradual, really gradual, just bit by bit. And there's other changes around here that are bit by bit. There's been a lot more rocks around here, boulders, and the hillsides used to be scrub brush, but they're turning to rock really slowly. So you'll drive by a hill and you thought it was always scrub brush, and then you'll see one little rock outcropping. And since the ME, now I'll watch that hill. And then, months later, there'll be 2 rock outcroppings. And then there'll be 3 rock outcroppings, or maybe the 2, one of them will get bigger. And it just does a little bit, little jumps, just little jumps. So it's so easy to write that off. I mean, those rock changes, if I didn't know about the ME and I hadn't been watching that hill, I would have never picked up on those. So I think that's how they change, just bit by bit, whenever they can, bit by bit. I mean, sometimes when a road moves, you can't go bit by bit. But when it can, I swear, it's just so subtle. Cedar James, preliminal, been here a year, but the map changes I started to notice a couple of years ago and have studied closely since the subtle changes here and there. Yep. And it also, I notice it seems like it becomes active in one area, and one area will be changing bit by bit, maybe a little faster, and then it'll kind of stop there, and it'll move to another area of the world, and it'll be kind of active over there. The same thing with the anatomy changes. Like lately, I've seen a lot of changes here. And I've also noticed my voice has been scratchy and changing. And then later it'll move somewhere else, and I'll see a lot of changes there. Yes, Germany never had a coast, Debbie Dyer. Absolutely. Germany and Poland did not have a coast. Let's see. Let me pull up world map. This is one that very few people have really, I don't know if they just come from a different timeline or what, but let me see if I can find one with the countries on it here. Yoinks. Hopefully this will be a big image here. Hopefully it'll load. Maybe it won't. View image. Nope, tiny. I want to find one with maybe this one. Ugh, too tiny. I need a big image. Nope. This one looks like it might be big. There. Okay, it's decent sized. Okay. You know what? Maybe I just need to do Europe map. Okay, so Poland and Germany were not coastal for me either. And this is going to seem weird, but right when it jumped, a number of people saw it. What I remember is Norway, Sweden, and Finland were smaller by quite a bit, and they were on top of Poland and Germany, right here next to Denmark. And they came off, and they curled around, and they would kind of touch Denmark. And what I noticed over time was they were getting bigger and bigger, and I kept commenting on Recon. I'm like, Norway and Sweden or Finland are huge. They were tiny little things in my old timeline. They were just tiny little countries, and they were getting huge. And then one day suddenly they jumped to over here onto Russia, and I was like flipping out. And I noticed it because somebody said, oh, what the heck, Poland was never coastal. And I kept looking. I'm like, okay, Poland was never coastal. Well, what was on top of it then? And I kept looking, and I finally realized it was Norway, Sweden, and Finland. They jumped up to here. And what I've noticed since that move, which was maybe 5-6 months ago, is that they have continued to get bigger, and the little water lakes and stuff in here are expanding, so they're almost cut off from the mainland now. There's a whole history now of them fighting with Russia and all that. Never was there for me before. That's totally different. Let me see if I can find Finland Europe map. I want to get. There's another thing that I've been seeing lately. That's one area that's been changing a lot. This big lump here on I guess that's Russia now. This lump has been growing and growing and growing. When Sweden, Norway, and Finland first jumped, this giant knob was not here. And what I've seen in a lot of the geography changes is that these waterways are slinking inland and becoming like giant inland waterways. So there's like a lot of water between things, and islands that were pretty far out, like Great Britain, are coming in close with a thin line of water. I don't know if you remember, way back in my old timeline, the English Channel was something that you could barely swim across. It was considered impossible to swim across for a long time, and then finally one person managed to do it without dying. And it was considered a big deal. Well, now if you look at it, I mean, people swim that thing like regularly, and some people even swim it and come back because it's just like 20 miles now. And so you can actually swim and then swim back. And it used to be a huge, ridiculous distance, and now it's just like 20 miles. So now they're just saying, oh, it's hard to swim because of the currents. But I mean, it has changed so much. Let's see. For me, Snorri was a separate island, nothing like it is here. Ah, interesting. Gosh, I wish I knew my geography way back, but I'm pretty sure Norway was never a separate island for me. I mean, Greenland was a lot smaller and way further down towards the equator. Greenland is coming up. It's almost replacing Antarctica now. It's almost at the pole. So if countries are shrinking, where are the people? That's a good question. But one thing I have to ask is, I mean, how do we ever know how many people there ever was? We just have a number that is on the internet or on TV, but we can't count all the people. I mean, that number could change, and the number of people never change, and we would never know. So I'm not sure if people are really disappearing or they're just changing the number, because there's just no way to know how many people are on this earth. If they said there's 7,000, or they say there's 10,000, or they say there's 20,000, I have no way of knowing. I mean, I just have to trust the word. I'll tell you one thing, though. Let me see if I can find it. There is a world population counter. Let me see if I can find the same one I always use. And that thing keeps resetting for me. 7.6. It's been 7.6 for like almost 2 years now. Let's see if it still says that. I gotta find the same one. Yeah, there it is. This one. It was like 7.4, and then it was up to 7.6. And the way it goes, in a couple months it should be more, but then it keeps resetting and going back to about 7.6. Was actually 7.6, like 4.6 last time I checked, and now it's just 7.616. So this thing, I mean, I don't know if it's just timelines jumping and this is an accurate number or what, but it doesn't seem to get past 7.6 for me for quite some time. So something's going on with that population counter. The Germans used to reserve the sunbeds on their holidays as they never had their own beaches. Yeah, and now, there's so much different with the wars and like World War II. I wish that I had studied that harder when I was in school. I mean, I definitely noticed changes in like the Berlin Wall and stuff, though. I'm English, and I remember the channel being 25 miles to France. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot longer for me. I think it's 20 miles now. English Channel. Let's see. Last I checked, it was like 21 miles. English Channel. How long does it take to swim the English Channel? 10 hours and 34 minutes. See if I can find the length of that thing. All right, it's getting length, but I'm not getting width, and I didn't have length memorized. How wide is the English Channel? Oh, Oh, it's dropped to 19 nautical miles. I swear it was 21 not long ago. 19. I was wondering if it was going to drop under 20. So it's dropped under 20. Sea of Brittany. Yeah, I haven't checked that one in a while. There was no numbers under 20 before. They would give nautical miles and they would give regular miles, but none of them were under 20. It was like 20.9 or something like that. Okay, so it's definitely getting closer. I think eventually there's just going to be a bridge and everything. I think they still have that. They have that underwater bridge right now, but okay, so it's no longer 25 miles to France. The shortest distance is 21. Of course, that's not to, I assume that's to France, but anyway, I'm positive that the shortest distance was not 19. Let's see. Close these up. Finland. Okay, we covered that one. Oh, that was another weird one I don't think I've covered yet. We got the ship tracks. Okay, here's another weird one. I mean, I can't prove this is an ME, but I just thought it was hilarious. After all those millions of years, now they're pulling into question whether flossing is any good for your teeth. And they apparently they did a meta study where they checked all the old studies and they didn't feel they were good quality. And in some locations, they're saying if you floss wrong, you could actually damage your gums. And there's no evidence that it cuts cavities that much. And then other people are saying you should do it anyway. Turns out all that flossing may be overrated. The latest dietary guidelines for Americans, issued by Department of Agriculture on Health and Human Services, quietly dropped any mention of flossing without notice. This week, the Associated Press reported that officials had never researched the effectiveness of regular flossing as required before cajoling Americans to do it. The statement issued on Tuesday, the American Academy of Periodontology acknowledged that most of the current evidence fell short because researchers had not been able to include enough participants or examine gum health over a significant amount of time. I don't see how, with billions of people flossing and everybody visiting the dentist, how they were not able to accomplish basic research. But anyways, that's the latest. It looks like flossing is on the way out. I just think it's hilarious. Who knows what other famous scientific facts are going to get thrown out the window, but I bet there's going to be a lot of them. Let's see, I'm getting a little bit behind. Browse County, Florida is complete swap in this earth. I know Florida's changed a lot. I mean, it's a lot smaller, for one. Once upon, yes, Norway, Sweden, Finland were never huge stretched up like that. So freaky. Yeah, I'm glad somebody sees it. But for me, they were also on top of Poland and Germany. And that's why Poland and Germany were not coastal before. And now they are. So many cities inland now have access to the ocean via a river. Yes, the rivers are cutting in. It's like everything is going to be a giant river with a bunch of island-like, I don't know, it just seems like there's something weird going on with the rivers coming in. Oh, Mandela Effect's in. Probably mourning over there. Sweden for me was approximately where Upper Poland is now, and Finland was a small boxer-shaped country north above that. Norway was a small island country with a narrow vertical country on the right sides. I remember Norway still kind of stuck onto the other ones, but overall, that's about right. They were tiny. They were just little countries. But, I wonder if maybe it really looks like Europe is way puny. So maybe they really didn't change that much, but Europe has shrunk. and maybe Sweden and them are about the same. It's hard to judge size when everything's changing size. So usually you judge size by comparing one thing to another, but when both things are changing sizes, the Earth seems to be changing sizes, the oceans, everything. So you can only compare them between each other unless you had the mileage memorized, and I did not have the mileage memorized, unfortunately. I know it's far-fetched, but I sometimes think, how do we know if we are all talking with each other through internet from different timelines? Shari D, yes, I have really wondered that. And we have actually on Retcon, made a point of saying, do you see this? Because this is what I see. And we all seem to be seeing the same thing. At least the sentences seem to match up. But, I mean, for all I know, you typed one sentence and I saw another sentence, and then I said one thing, but you heard something else. I mean, I can't really, it's kind of far-fetched, I know, and I really don't know if that's what's happening, but, I mean, it could be. I don't know. I've wondered about that. Or maybe we just conveniently neglect to mention things that don't match between our timelines. I mean, there's been some weird stuff where I even think that my own self is against me on these MEs sometimes, because there was something weird that happened where this restaurant was open on Sundays and we were visiting it, and then later suddenly they claimed they were never open on Sundays ever. And one thing that was weird about that was that I always use my credit card to pay everything. But for some reason, every time I went there and ate lunch there with my friends on Sunday, I paid in cash every time. And I could have used that credit card info. I could have checked on it. I could have, maybe it would have been some kind of proof, whether it was there or not. I mean, if I paid with credit card and they remembered seeing me in there a whole bunch of times, and then all of that evidence disappeared off my bill, it would be really interesting. But yet, no, I had to, the one time and only time I always paid with cash was that one friggin' restaurant. So I'm really suspicious that even my own subconscious mind is undermining my ability to catch the MEs, or is somehow in on it. I mean, there's definitely something going on where even my own mind is, there's just, you don't really realize I just never pay with cash. I just never do. And yet I did like 10 times in a row at that restaurant. It was like I decided to pay with cash the first time, and then I even remember thinking about, oh, well, I always pay with cash, so I'll just pay with cash, which makes like no sense at all. So that it bugs me. Now I have no credit card record of having eaten there. Even 5 of us all ate there every Sunday for, a couple Sundays a month for the whole summer, and then suddenly they were never open. All of us have the memory of them being open on Sundays. That's a whole nother story, because then I was like grilling the heck out of the workers there, and that's a whole nother story. That's a story I should make a whole video on it. It's a trip, but it's another one of them out there stories that I can't prove. Angel Light, it's all interesting. I hope I'm still alive when the truth comes out. Could you imagine when you become an elderly person and no answers, the world would be totally different? Yeah, Angel, I do worry about that. I hope that at least I'll learn something and get more clues as time goes on. I'm not sure if I hold out the hope that I'll get all the answers, but I mean, it's going to be just, I mean, if this thing just drags on and on without answers for years and years, I mean, I've definitely learned some things about it. I've gotten some clues about it in the last 2 years, although it's been slow going. But I mean, it's just going to be, I think it's going to be hard on the psyche if it just keeps going and going and going, and nobody else sees it but a few of us, and we don't know anything. So I hope that's not what's going to happen. I really do. I hope that we'll get some answers. Maybe we'll get more global recognition. Maybe we'll, over time. It definitely seems like the current timeline is more into weird stuff and UFOs, and those things are more accepted than my old timeline, where there's things that happen here that did not happen to my old timeline. For instance, the famous wow signal from space in my old timeline was debunked as just being the sound of the Big Bang, the universal sound. In this timeline, it was never explained. So that was a trip for me when I found out that the wow signal was never explained in this timeline. And there's just, so it seems like we're heading in a direction where the weird is more acceptable, and maybe in 5 or something years we'll shift into a place where we have more acceptance of the Mandela effect and maybe more research. I don't know, but it'd be nice. Maybe we're the front runners for this one. Maybe our job is to introduce it. That would be interesting. Oops, come back here. Shari D. It wouldn't help. We paid with a card for hotel online. We had email confirmations, SMS from bank confirming, my husband forwarding me email confirmation, and all was gone. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons it would be tricky for me is that restaurant knew that I had been there a bunch of times. They knew me. And so if all evidence disappeared from my credit card, because I'd only ever been there on a Sunday. Sunday's my day off, and it's the only time I go out for lunch, because every other time I have to go to work, and so I don't do the whole leisurely lunch thing. So it would have been extra weird if there was zero evidence on my credit card. So no matter what would happen, it would be weird. How was I in there and eating? I mean, we've seen on Redcon that when there's a shift, all evidence disappears. So what you're saying does not surprise me. It fits in with what I've been seeing. But what's weird for me, if I had paid with credit card and all info disappeared, that would actually be less weird for me than the fact that I chose not to pay with credit card. That's what freaks me out, because I always pay with a credit card. Always. And I can't see why I didn't that time. It's some kind of, I just feel like it's probably Mandela effect related, that my old subconscious mind said, hey, just pay cash. And, maybe it's a stretch, but if you know me, it's just not normal. I remember E-Man comics in the 70s. I'm sorry, I don't know that one. E-Man 31, having a hard time sleeping lately. Yeah, Martha Jayne. It's getting harder to sleep in the recent years, and there's definitely times when I don't know why I can't sleep. It's not like I'm even stressed out, but my sleep is all goofy. Once upon a time, everything before and after paying was there, but just this one didn't show up anywhere. Yeah. I'm not surprised. We've had on Redcon, we've had threads where we talked about, like, for instance, when the debtor's version of the Lord's Prayer showed up, we discussed that, and the skeptics were all saying, oh, well, it's in some versions of the Bible but not others, so you people are probably all just getting confused with your versions. And of course, there's a lot of people who only ever study one version of the Bible, and so they're like, no, impossible, this is my version. And there was all these threads debating that. And then months later, that debtor's version was in all the Bibles, and the trespasses version was not in any of the versions. And so we're like, oh, let's find those threads where we discussed it being in half the versions. Well, all those threads were gone. Every thread was just gone. And I think because that one, the other thing we sometimes see is that threads will just change, like what you wrote in them changed from what you remember. I think the reason the debtors one had to go, though, is because the entire subject could not be easily changed to match current realities, because you can't have a whole thread on it being in some versions and not others and change that to match the current reality, which is its no versions. So yes, the evidence disappears, and it's very irritating. Jason, good morning. Yeah, it's morning for you. It's 2 o'clock in the morning here. Apparently, I've been yapping for 2 hours. So I'll probably try to wrap it up pretty soon. I guess now I can see how people go over time. Luckily, there's nobody after me, so I'm not encroaching on anybody's channel time to my knowledge. I came in late, but I had basically had to quit my job that is email and document based. Multiple times there were emails communicating about uploaded documents, but all proof of documents disappeared. Yeah, there's been some problems at work with me too. Things change, and I sell online, so I have item descriptions, and I'm pretty careful about getting the item descriptions accurate. And then the thing will change and my item description won't match. And it kind of pisses me off because if the thing would change, I'd wish my item description would also match it. So then then customers, if I don't catch it, a customer might complain that the item does not match the description. Lachete, judge not lest ye be judged. That's what I remember. Forgive us our trespasses. Exactly. That was my timeline. There was no debtors. There was no debtors. And then there was debtors in just some versions. Now there's debtors in no versions. Or trespasses. There's trespasses in no versions. Let's see. 2 hours. Yes, I know. Luckily, I don't have to do anything exciting tomorrow morning, so I could sleep in. Okay, the sky is completely different than it used to be. The moon I saw not in the sky half the month. Ayana. Yeah, there was a shift a couple months ago where for a while the moon was out during the day all the time. And since I'm in California, we get clear skies a lot, even in the winter. And I would see it out in the day all the time, driving around in midday. Like half the time it would be out. And then there was a shift, and now the daytime moon travels near the sun and is supposedly very hard to see. And you don't really see it until it gets closer to full. So when it's on the crescent, like a thin crescent, you don't see it. It's low in the sky and near the sun. And so that's a shift from months before. So now we're not seeing it in the daytime nearly as much as we were for a while. Biker Babe 2009. My friend's last name just changed yesterday from Horn to Horn without an E. Yeah, I've seen. I don't know why all the changes are just one digit. It's just weird. A name changes, but it almost always changes by one digit. I have a friend. She uses her maiden name on her Facebook, and the last letter disappeared. And I have another acquaintance of mine that has a dog, and the dog was named Zoe, and now it is named Zoe. And I actually, you'd think I'd know by now that the ME does this, but I actually thought she was joking. She's like, no, my dog's name is Zoe. I'm like, no, it's not. It's Zoe. I heard her call that dog's name a jillion times. And we used to kind of joke because the dog is a male dog and its name was Zoe. And I remember even specifically several times people asking why she named her dog Zoe when it's a male. And I figured, she just liked that name, who knows. But when the times that they asked her that, she never answered. It's interesting when I look back on it that she never said anything. Like she didn't hear the question or she didn't want to answer it. We would ask it and she wouldn't answer. And now that dog's name is Zoe, which is much more masculine name. And so the question now makes no sense. But anyway, I don't know. Different version of her, different version of the dog. I don't know. Okay, this guy. My big pressure cooker disappeared without the lid 8 years ago and never came back. Yeah, I can't help you with that one. But you got the lid, but not the cooker, huh? The Bible changes are freaky. Yeah, Cedar James, there's some of the changes are disturbing, and in the Bible is what's going on in the Bible is definitely one of those areas that's disturbing. E-Man31, see you later. Thank you for coming. I have a list of 33 Bible changes that I just made yesterday. Yeah, look at Ia's channel. She's got like jillions of them. EYA, she's got a real good channel for Bible changes. Yeah, sometimes you ask people questions on email and they don't answer and are like having a different conversation. Cedar James, it just seems like sometimes they just, like they don't hear you. They don't process your question, and then it's like you never asked it. It's kind of a weird blank. The sky is what woke me up to all the changes. Fake planes, fake birds. I don't know, I haven't seen any obviously fake anything. I mean, it looks as real as the rest of it. It's definitely changed, though. Okay, let's see. I think I've covered almost everything I wanted to cover. I think the only thing left was, this last subject was, it's kind of a small one, but this weird fungus growing on the trees. This one's been discussed on Retconned a number of times, but it's the cedar apple rust. This person, Barbarian Bobo, was the last one to bring it up, and it's interesting. So it's a really creepy... See these things? You might think they're flowers, but they are actually... These things are actually like a fungus thing. And they're supposed to be gelatinous and disgusting looking things. And they're covering this juniper. And they look like otherworldly. Well, here's a close-up of them. There's a number of kinds of them. So this big, slimy, disgusting... I mean, in my old timeline, funguses were, like a normal shroom was not all slimy and disgusting. You imagine these things all over your juniper? And these junipers, this stuff covers a large swath of the United States, too. Gymnosporangium juniperae virginianae is a plant pathogen that's caused cedar apple rust in virtually any location where apples or crab apples coexist with eastern red cedar. Cedar apple can be destructive or disfiguring disease on both apples and cedars. Quince and hawthorn are the most common host, and many species of juniper can substitute for the eastern red cedars. So there should be like most of the United States where you can get this stuff. And there's different varieties of it. This one's, they're just gross. Anyway, we were just discussing that, and I've never seen this thing before. So you get these huge galls here, and then they grow these giant fingers of slime. It's just classic Mandela effect. Just creepy and gross looking. So anyway, I think that's the last thing I wanted to cover today. It's getting late, so I'm going to probably check out. Let me just catch up on the chat real quick. In many realities, that email was never sent or sent at different times. We've had some stuff like disappear out of our business, and it's not like anything anybody would want to steal. And then there's been stuff that has kind of shown up. Like I remembered I ordered something and I can't find it anywhere. And then I totally thought I was out of something, and then I find a giant pile of it in the back shelf. And I could just be having trouble remembering it all, but it's been kind of weird. It makes it hard to run a business when you're supposed to have 500 or something and it's gone, though. Luckily, it's not happening too much, so it's just like a nuisance. Jason Maggart, do you believe California has shifted orientation rotation? I live near Seattle and I fly to Cali, Phoenix all the time. The flight time and direction has been changing. I think that California is a lot smaller than it used to be. Maybe like surface area wise, it's about half its old size. I do believe in my timeline, Sacramento was in the center of our state, and now it is way up north over by San Francisco, and that is a trip. because I used to always say, oh, Sacramento is kind of a pit of a city, but it makes sense that it is the capital of our state because it's in the center. Like they must have picked it because it was in the center. Well, it's not in the center anymore. So it's like the whole state fell south, but Sacramento stayed in its place, and so the rest of the state has slid past it. I mean, that's kind of how it looks like to me. So there's definitely places I visit that I can get to a lot faster now, too. So California is a lot smaller, in my opinion, a lot smaller. Also, the states around California, it's pretty controversial, but a lot of the states on kind of the north east side of California, I think have shifted around a lot. Also, the whole north end of California past San Francisco, I remember there not being much past San Francisco. There's a lot more, and I don't recognize any of that stuff, hardly. I mean, I remember Redding, but a bunch of that stuff, there's a bunch of cities up there. It's like total alien territory to me. Totally weird. I used to live up north too, so it's a trip. Shari D. It was 76 for me. Are we talking about Moneybag 76 instead of Moneybag 73? Because Moneybags was 76 for me. That was kind of an older ME, though. I used to drive, visit friends back in the 80s all over Cali, and even have a journal. Times and distances in my journal are way off from today map. That's interesting that the distances did not change in your writing. That's interesting. I'm still trying to decipher exactly what does and doesn't change. One guy was on Redcon saying that he thinks if there's only one copy of it, it doesn't change. That was what his research seemed to indicate. I haven't seen anything that really goes against that. Preliminary, Vancouver Island was much more north and Seattle was more west. That area is different here too. Vancouver Island was out in the friggin' waters, and I have been watching it. This is even after I learned of the ME. I was watching Vancouver Island. It was out in the water, and it just started slamming inland, and it's been ripping into the coast and the top part of the USA, and that has all happened in the last 2 years, probably even less, maybe more like a year. So yeah, I've been watching that one change. Vancouver Island's a huge one. Oh, the other thing I should probably mention, Canada. I remember way back, the big cities in Canada used to be, some of them used to be further north. It's like all the big cities of Canada have flopped down towards the border, like all of them. And yeah, there was a lot near the border, but they're like all near the border now. And there's a lot of Canadians who swear it's always been that way, but no, what country has all of their big cities along the border? Canada's big cities trip me out now. I remember some of them being along the west coast, further up at minimum, because my parents drove to some of those before. They had relatives up there. So, and I used to plan out their trips for them because they weren't really good at that stuff. And no, there's something funny about Canadian cities and their current location. In fact, even my city of San Diego looks further south to me. It did not used to be quite this close to Mexico. I'm from Vancouver Island, and there are lakes here there were none before. There are new lakes everywhere, Cedar James. There are everywhere. That's definitely a Mandela effect that just keeps on playing out. Lakes and rivers everywhere. I absolutely just can't get on board with any water shortage threats. that come on the news anymore, because it's just ludicrous compared to what I see. Twice as much water at Manitoba. There, Canada is like riddled with lakes. It looks like somebody took a shotgun and shot them full of lakes. I mean, Canada is ridiculous now with the lakes. It's like half lakes. I have old ferry flyers stating times to island, all way off now. That's interesting, Jason. Maybe you should take some images and post them somewhere. That would be really good residual. Of course, the ME is pretty darn sneaky, and you might find that there's like huge currents or something that account for the excessive time. I mean, it's pretty hard to catch the ME flat-footed. It's very good at coming up with lame or sometimes not that lame excuses. Once upon a time, I have just found people with sculpted hair of animals, hair sculptors of animals. Have you heard of this? I've heard of people getting the hair of their animals and having like fabric woven out of it, like the long-haired animals, but I have not heard of this sculpted animal hair. I have to look that up. Hair. Sculpting fur tutorial. How to sculpt hair or fur. Making figurine hair fur. Let's see what these images look like. Are we talking about when they're on the animal still? Okay, I have seen this recently. Definitely not old time. But yeah, they're just like this cat. Yeah, they're cutting it so they look weird. So the animals look like other kind of animals and stuff. I mean, obviously you can't prove this is a Mandela effect unless you find evidence of it going way back. But this definitely seems to be some kind of new trend. First they were making like dogs look like lions and stuff, and that seems to be a continuation of that trend. I don't know if it's like, look at these animals. I guess it doesn't really hurt them. Looks like they're putting weird symbols on the backs of these poodles and stuff. Look, they're making a face on the back of this dog. People have a lot of free time on their hands. Luckily, the dogs probably don't know how bad they look. Yeah, new for me. I don't know what to say. Weird trends. I mean, it's definitely new for me. I don't know if it's new for this timeline or not. So anyway, yeah, Jason Maggard, if you have some flyers that really contradict the ME or the current reality, you probably definitely want to find somehow to post those or send them to somebody. It's good to have them up, but like I said, check it out because you might find that the ME has covered its butt. It's very sneaky that way. Oh, wow, never seen it, but I was talking about people. So what are they, like, taking their animals' shed fur and then making stuff out of it? I guess maybe it's these. The artist behind Nine Lives Twine cat hair got creative and fashioned her cat's fuzz into traditional cat toy shape. Okay, so this might be what you were talking about. They're taking cat hair and then they're making little beasts out of it, like mice or something. So yeah, it's almost like a kind of a felting thing. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one either, but I can't say I'm super shocked. I assume they wash the fur. Look at this poor dog has been made into a buffalo. Buffaloes have really changed shape. Buffaloes used to have a big black shock of long hair along their back. But now I think I could talk about the ME forever. Buffaloes. Now if you look at buffaloes, let's see if I can find some good images of them. They don't have that shock of fur that they used to have. Yeah. So for me, buffaloes had a shock of black fur along the back. And they were more even across the back. They've gotten really humped up at the front. One thing that's ironic about buffaloes is I used to look at the Native American little totem carvings, and the buffaloes had this shape like this buffalo has. And I used to wonder why, because the buffaloes in real life did not have that shape. They were more like cows. I mean, they just looked like kind of hairy cows. They had that shock of black fur, and they had more fur in the front, but they were very cow-like. And now they have this kind of giant humpy front, and they really look like those totems now, the little carved totems that the Native Americans used to use. They got real tiny at the back here. The face has changed a lot. So these beasts have changed a lot for me. They've got a ton of fur down here. They didn't used to have it. It used to be more along the top here. So they also didn't used to have this waddle thing coming down from their chin. Oh yeah, they're really different for me. Really different. I remember they used to cut and fashion dogs' hair, but never shave pictures on them. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that's a Mandela effect. It's definitely a trend now. I mean, if you find that was popular way back, then I don't know. Everything's weird in this timeline, so. All right, anyway, it's like 2:30 in the morning here. I've been yapping on forever. Another half hour, I think it's time for somebody else to come on. So I think I'm going to cut it out now. And thank you all for coming. When lots of people come to the chat, I guess I end up talking forever because you guys keep bringing up more and more MEs. So thank you. I really appreciate it. But if I don't go to bed now, I'm going to sleep half the morning. So thank you so much for coming, everybody. I really appreciate it. Oh, who's on next? Yeah. Let me run over here and look. Theoretically, it'll be on my. All right, I am at 8 a.m. Whoops. You know what? I'm not sure who's on next. Let me go to my YouTube channel. So you guys, it's a secret evil plot to stop me from getting off. All right, let's see. You know, I probably should have it memorized who is coming on next. Stop. All right, I come in at 8. 9, 10, 11, 12. Ooh, it's 4 hours before somebody comes on. At 12 o'clock GMT or 7 a.m. Eastern Standard, it's Rain on the Plains. And considering that she was just on, I'm assuming it's probably morning for her or something, because I can't imagine it's middle of the night for her. Anyway, so Rain's on at 12. And so that should be a good show. So you guys might have to live for a few without anybody, because I'm not making it for 4 hours. All right, so let's see. Anyways, so yep, I'm going to turn it off now. It's hard to say goodbye, but it is time. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. This is Eva signing off for Once Upon a Timeline.